Do you have a work-life balance? It's frequently mentioned, but we never get to know what it actually is. Today we will try to figure it out. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today we are trying to figure out what work-life balance actually is. I tried to find out where the term is originally coming from, but I had little success. I stumbled upon a source that claimed it was first used in the women's rights movement in Great Britain in the 80s, but then I looked up the source they relied upon and I read that one and it didn't mention that information, so it was a dead end after all. I couldn't find out who created the term, so I can't tell what the original creator defined work-life balance as. And unfortunately, no really proper definition has emerged over time either, so there is no generally accepted definition. There are only vague and flabby definitions of the term. Now, the term obviously isn't that simple. Work-life balance. Now, work is obvious to some degree, but life, there it gets complicated. Because what exactly is life? This is obviously quite different for different people. So a good work-life balance depends on the person we are talking about. What constitutes a good work-life balance for you might not work for someone else. Since we don't have a proper general definition, I would like to present my personal definition to you. Now, this is obviously in no way official or generally accepted. It's just so we have some basis to base this discussion upon. I think work-life balance has three main aspects. First of all, it is a state. There is work-life balance if your work is a healthy part of your overall life, that enriches your life and that does not displace or harm other areas of your life. And second, work-life balance is a skill or a collection of skills, of soft skills to be precise, because, as I said, work-life balance is highly individual, so the perfect work-life balance for you cannot be provided by someone else. You have to create it for yourself, and for that you need certain skills like stress management, self-management and others. And third, work-life balance also is an obligation. For the employer, for example, there is an obligation to provide the conditions, the circumstances that allow for work-life balance. In some countries there are legal obligations, but there is always also an ethical obligation to allow for work-life balance. And of course, this also applies the other way around. So family and actors in your private life should not interfere with your working life. And we can also ascend to a higher level here. On a social and political level, we also have important obligations in regard to work-life balance. For example, for a lot of employees, it is very important that proper childcare is provided. Now, even more interesting than the question what work-life balance is the question what work-life balance is not, because frequently I stumble upon myth and misunderstandings, and I'd like to present some of those. Now, to be clear about that, those are myth and misunderstandings from my point of view. They are not wrong by definition because we don't have a proper definition. This is pretty much my opinion. One idea I encounter frequently is that work-life balance is an end in itself. So you pretty much say, oh no, I have all this work and my private life, and on top of that, now I also have to do this work-life balance. A nice example is the author Matthew Kelly. He asked for a book, 10,000 people, would you rather have balance or satisfaction? And unsurprisingly, everybody chose satisfaction. But this is, from my point of view, a rather stupid question, because it's like asking, would you rather have a basket full of ingredients or a fully prepared meal? No, obviously, most people would prefer the fully prepared meal, but this doesn't change the fact that the basket full of ingredients is a necessary prerequisite for that fully prepared meal. You won't find a lot of people walking around saying, oh, my work-life balance is totally broken and in shambles, but I feel great. So this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Work-life balance is not an end in itself. Another idea I encounter frequently, or that isn't clearly voiced, but that you will often encounter between the lines, is that work is actually a problem that needs to be fought. That there is a very negative image of work. And this I find problematic because, first of all, for most of us, work is an important and necessary part of our lives. Most of us don't have enough money to be entirely financially independent and just stop working from one day to the next. And if it is an important and necessary part of our lives, painting it in such dark and unpleasant colors will only make ourselves unhappy. And furthermore, we often have a move here from a specific problem to a general one. If your job is so bad that you suffer from it each day, you need to find a different one. You need to figure out if you can work for another employer, and if the whole area you work in is so bad, you need to figure out if you can get some training or further education some way so you can switch to another area. But it won't help you to say, oh, my job is totally horrible. Maybe I can get some work-life balance to improve things. This won't work out. Another idea that is a bit similar is the thought that your spare time needs to balance out and repair the damage caused by work. So this pretty much works like this. You have a long day at work, and then you go home and you are exhausted, and maybe you are frustrated and stressed, and maybe your self-confidence has suffered, and you are in a really bad state and in a bad mood. And then you say, all right, now here are my 2 hours of spare time, and they better be that great that they balance out and repair all those exhaustion and stress and frustration and whatnot I suffered at work. And this is a pretty bad idea. Apart from, again, having this negative image of work, this means putting lots and lots of pressure on this spare time. And this isn't a good basis for a nice and relaxing evening. Another idea I encounter frequently is that career and work-life balance don't go together. You either get a career or you get work-life balance. You can't have both. This is based on the idea that to have a great career, you really need to break yourself. You need to sacrifice everything. You need to subordinate everything in your life to your work, or the career won't work out and you better forget about it right from the beginning. This is a similar mindset as when people are proud of their stress. When people say, oh, I eat headache pills like Skittles and I haven't slept through an entire night for months. This is how great a manager I am. And this is a pretty self-destructive mindset. I mean, of course, to have a great career, especially if you aim high, if you don't just want to be the leader of your department, but the CEO of a multinational corporation or something like that, there are probably sacrifices. But if you believe this gets to a point where you really need to break yourself to achieve that goals, would you really still want to pursue them? A similar idea is that you can't focus on work if you want to have work-life balance. So if you have a decent work-life balance and you say, oh well, my work is most important for me, I am really enthusiastic about it and I want to put all my time and my energy into it because I really like doing it and whatnot, then you break your work-life balance. And I don't believe this is the case. From my point of view, two things are important here. You make the decision consciously and voluntarily. If you do it because you want to, why shouldn't you do it? I mean, if someone says, yeah, I've spent most of my day working and it was great, and now that I look back upon this day, I think it was a great day and I feel really good about it. Why should I try to talk him out of it? If it works out for you, if you feel good about it, this pretty much means that you have achieved work-life balance. So, as long as it is consciously and voluntarily, I don't see any problem here. And finally, one idea I encounter frequently is that balance means that you have to put the same amount of time and energy into your work and into your spare time. So you need to split your time evenly between work and spare time. And of course, this is doomed to fail right from the beginning. Most of us have a 40-hour work week, and this is without commute and lunch break and overtime. And of course, after work, there are also things like household chores, and we need to go shopping and prepare dinner and whatnot. So in the end, the spare time, the leisure time we have is way smaller than the amount of working time we have each day. But this isn't necessarily a problem. I mean, of course, if you really want to have leisure time and working time on an equal footing, if you want them to be equal, you can achieve that by working part-time and things like that. But this isn't an approach and a way I would want to force everybody into. This is for the people who really want it, and everybody else can still have work-life balance even if the work takes up more time than spare time and leisure time, and this is perfectly normal. So those are some of the most typical myth and misunderstandings I encounter. And as you noticed, some of them include this aspect of having a very negative image of work. So I would like to say a few words about the value of work. Because first of all, work ensures our livelihood. And this is pretty obvious and trivial, but it might not be present to us all the time, and it is important. And most of us aren't deep in poverty. I mean, the fact that you have a device to watch YouTube on and that you have access to the internet speaks of at least a little bit of living standard and luxury, at least a very small amount. And this is also something that we acquire through our work. And obviously, if you say, well, I'd rather have more spare time and a lower living standard, you can achieve this by reducing your working time. We will discuss this in an upcoming video soon. But this is really value we receive from our work. And furthermore, to a certain degree, work can also add meaning to our lives. Now, this is something we need to be careful about. I presented to you the book Feierabend by Volker Keats, unfortunately not available in English, where Volker Keats discusses all the overly high expectations we have of work, that it needs to give meaning to our lives and self-fulfillment, new challenges every day, things like that. And he clearly says those expectations will never be met because they are so unrealistic. But nonetheless, the fact remains that at work and in our working life, we can have successes and achievements and a sense of achievement. And we can experience self-efficacy, we can encounter problems and solve problems and feel good about it. And for a lot of jobs, we need to acquire certain skills, certain competence, and we can exercise this competence. So there are a lot of positive experiences that can really enrich our lives. And work also provides a space for social contact. We get to know other people, the people we work with, our colleagues, and we can form relationships with them, get to know them, and maybe have nice and friendly interactions. And a lot of friendships and relationships start at work. So this is also really important. And finally, for a lot of people, it seems to be really helpful that work adds a certain structure to the day. A lot of people are troubled if they have a longer vacation, or if they are sick for a longer time, or if they retire. And certainly they need to structure their entire day and figure out what to do for an entire day. And for them, it is really helpful to have this structure that is created by work, where you leave for work in the morning and you return in the evening and so on. So there is a lot of value there. But nonetheless, of course, there are plenty of challenges in regard to work-life balance. And a lot of those arise from role conflicts. In our day-to-day lives, we take on a lot of different roles. For example, we are a friend, we are a father or a mother, we are an employee. And we hold ourselves to certain standards, so we probably want to be a good friend, a good father or mother, a good employee. But those roles often clash, they are often in conflict. Imagine, for example, your superior tells you, oh, we have a certain crisis here, it would be really helpful if you could stay a bit longer and do some overtime to help. And earlier a friend called and told you, oh, I'm feeling really bad at the moment, I've had some bad experiences, bad breakup or whatever, and it would really help me if we could meet and talk to each other. And you promised your children that you would take them to the cinema, and you know they are looking forward to it. So you have to make a decision, and you have to prioritize one of those roles at the expense of the others. And if you keep favoring a certain role over the others time and time again, there will be an imbalance after a while, as we already discussed in the video about the forerunners theory. And this problem gets worse if there are real or perceived pressures involved. If there are situations where you say yes, but you would actually rather say no. For example, if you agree to do the overtime, even though you'd actually rather meet your friend or go to the cinema with your kids, but you think, oh, well, they might not keep employing me, they might not prolong my contract, maybe I won't get a raise, maybe I won't get a promotion, so you force yourself to make a decision you don't want to make. And again, this can lead to an imbalance where work ends up taking up all your time or your energy. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to come from the employer, as I said. It could be perceived pressures. And there is also the issue of overcommitment. where people commit themselves to a degree and work harder and more than is actually required of them, even more than is expected of a really good employee. And another thing that can add to this problem is if there are unclear priorities. If you never really thought about what is really important to me in my life, what are my personal priorities, and if you don't have personal priorities that you can base your decisions on, then usually the thing that is most urgent will win. Urgency will win. And urgency is usually found in your working life. Things like meeting a friend or going to the cinema with your kids, they aren't usually urgent. They can usually be postponed. But at work, everything is urgent. You always have deadlines and everything needs to be finished quickly. And there are milestones and plans and whatnot. So if you don't have clear priorities, you will usually succumb to the urgency of work matters. Another problem that can arise in regard to work-life balance is if there are negative interactions, negative influences between your working life and your private life. For example, let's say you return from work and you are in a really bad mood because you had negative experiences at work and your family has to suffer from your bad mood. Or the other way around, let's say you had a crisis in your private life, maybe some relationship conflict, and this leads to a loss of performance at work. Or a similar case, let's say you return in the evening and you are so exhausted from your work that you are not able to really pursue your hobbies or do sports, exercise, whatever. You end up just sitting on the couch and watching TV because you are too tired to do something else. Or the other way around, let's say you fall asleep at your job because you've partied all night or you've pursued your hobbies all night. So those are examples for problematic interactions, problematic influences to each other that can occur. And there are many more topics here because work-life balance touches plenty of other areas like stress management, self-management, social skills, especially if it's about saying no from time to time, self-assertion, things like that. And all of those areas, of course, have their own problems and challenges. So there are a lot of things to take into account here. Plenty of those topics we already discussed in the channel, and plenty more we will discuss in the future. As a small help for dealing with work-life balance, I would like to present to you 2 thought experiments that maybe can help you figure out if your work-life balance is alright at the moment or if there is need for improvement. They are quite simple. The first one works like this. Imagine your life would remain exactly like it is at the moment. Your work, your private life, relationships, whatever is important to you. And it will stay exactly like it is now. Not like, oh, my boss promised me things would get better, or in my family things will probably improve, things like that. Exactly as it is now. And imagine it would stay like this for 5 more years. What condition would you be in at the end of those 5 years? Would you still be healthy in mind and body and emotionally sound? And would you still like your work and enjoy your work and still like your life as it is? And if you think that problems will arise, you might want to make improvements now to prevent things from going bad. And the other thought experiment works like this. Let's say it is Monday morning and you've just had a great vacation. So you are in a really good state. You are in a good mood. You are at your best performance. You are relaxed. Everything is great. Now, of course, you start a usual working day where you will get exhausted and maybe there will be some stress, frustration, whatever, all of the things you encounter in a usual working day. Now, the question is, at which point will you again reach this really good state where you are relaxed, good mood, top performance? Will this be at some point throughout your working day, after a break maybe? Will it be after you've had some spare time in the evening and some time to relax? Will it be after a nice weekend? Will it be after your next vacation? Especially if you think it will take another vacation to get back to the good state, then there is probably room for some improvements, because this is not a cycle that is healthy in the long run. At the latest, after another relaxing weekend, you should again be in a good state, and your condition shouldn't deteriorate week after week on end. So what about your work-life balance? Are you content with things as they are now? Let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to your feedback. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a like, and if you didn't subscribe to the channel yet, I would be quite happy to have you as a subscriber. We will see each other again next week when we have a look at The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. For today, I take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.